We welcome you all here. And I think this is the third time in a row that I'm meeting all of you, or maybe most of you. We had two previous milestones that we
لكان هناك فرصتين للقاء بكم من قبل، إحداها في 24 من يوليو والآخر في 27 من يوليو. وفي هذه الفترة
we had three statements coming out from the NDC, our National Defense Council, and we had two presidential statements. The National Defense Council statements came out on the July 24th, 27th, and August 3rd, and we had the presidential statement coming out on the 7th and the 14th. In order to be on the same wavelength, I would like that we all establish a so-called chronological context and a factual context, like exactly what really happened between our first meeting, second meeting, and today, and how things build up to the moment that we're at now. I believe you all know that what happened on June 30th was simply a manifestation, undisputable, of the Egyptian aspirations to end theological fascism. It's an aspiration from Egyptians to bring about all what they've been aspiring for in January 25th, which is freedom, justice, and dignity, and to end the reign of, as I said, a theological fascism that has been depriving Egyptians from their basic rights in, I would say, a normal life, the basic freedoms, and maybe more so, coming to the point of discriminating against them. In the chronology as well, we've all seen that we moved from that point to the point that we've been all living in the so-called the sit-ins, and in that our statements came out as the presidential statements, the NDC statements, confirming the stand of the Egyptian state that we are supporting and confirming our stand of support for the freedom of expression, the freedom of protest, the freedom of sit-ins, as long as they are peaceful, non-violent, and they shouldn't turn, as they turned, into non-peaceful assemblies that came out and turned out to be more of terror thoughts. We've been witnessing that over the past 45 days or so, that despite in our statements coming out with confirmations that we are standing with the basic rights of our people for freedom of expression, all Egyptians, no difference between Islamists and non-Islamists, but turned out that we've been living in an experience, a very bitter one, that we've been having a change of the freedom of expression into originating into, as I mentioned, instigating violence and originating violence. It was clearly communicated by the Egyptian administration that we welcome efforts from local, regional, and international community to help bring back extremist powers that has been running the show in the non-peaceful assemblies of Rabaa and Al-Nahda to their own senses once again, to join the Egyptian caravan towards the future, to join the Egyptians in the roadmap in order to bring about the civil, democratic, and free state that we all yearn for. In a presidential statement on August 7th, we declared that all the international efforts that we supported was not capable and ceased to be capable to bring the extremist powers using the decoy of a sit-in to their senses to join the Egyptian march to the future. And at that moment, we were confirming once again over the past probably 10 days of Ramadan and Eid that we are making all kind of calls upon all parties and factions to come back to their senses, to denounce violence, to become part of the normal Egyptian citizenship, and as I said, to join us all Egyptians in our aspirations towards a better future. I would like to share some facts with you here. The first fact that Egyptians are today more united than they were ever before. We're not only united towards a common dream, but we're united against a common enemy. We're united towards a dream of a civil, democratic, free state. And we're united against the acts of terror, the instigation of violence, and the powers of evil that are trying to cripple our move towards the future. So when you talk about a difference or a divide that's happening in the Egyptian society, I think it's either wrongful thinking or a wishful thinking. But Egyptians today are more united than has been ever before. United in the sense of having a society, a state, institutions, all together, having one proper sense towards the future, having one clear thought and aspiration towards the kind of life that they'd like to live, and a very clear view of what they describe and define as the enemy, and more so, what they define and describe as victory over this enemy. They are destined to bring about victory against this enemy, not only with security measures, but with the rule of law, with the use of human rights framework. The other fact that I'd like to share with you, that in the incidents that we've been seeing not only over the 14th of August and after, but before the 14th of August and before, this is not a political dispute. We're not up against a political dispute or a political difference. We're truly up against a war of attrition that has been waged by forces of extremism developing by the day into some sorts of terrorism. And I know this might be, some of us might think this is an overplay of the situation, but relating what's happening in the heart of Cairo and other cities, what's happening in Sinai, and the pattern used to terrorize civilians, to burn churches, to kill and mutilate officers in uniform, to go against the basics of this, I would say, the civilization gestures and symbols of this country by attacking museums. This is not in any ways a sign of political difference or political dispute. This is, in the very lenient definition, is an act of extreme violence. In the proper definition, this is an act of terror. As I mentioned, what we've been witnessing in the streets is not in any ways and cannot be accepted to be defined as a manifestation of a political difference or a manifestation of political dispute. And we should be very wary about this. We should be very clear about it. And I think you all have to be clear about differentiating between what we can label as political difference and political disputes, and the tools used in political difference and political dispute, and the pattern of violence, instigating violence, burning cities, whole cities literally. What happened in Minya, what happened in Bani Suef, what happened in Kirdasa, what happened in Ramses yesterday, you cannot say that is a symbol or a gesture of political difference. Those are acts of real terror. Having a pattern like this, trying to terrorize people by random shooting of machine guns atop of a bridge in the middle of a city like Cairo, killing innocent people just standing in their balconies, cannot be said as an act of political difference or political dispute. You cannot justify a political difference or a political dispute by just inflicting and imposing acts of terror on an innocent society. I'll end with our pledge to our Egyptian people, our pledge to the Egyptian people that we will fulfill all the dues of the roadmap that we've been mandated for. all the dues that the Egyptian went out in the streets on the 30th of June, the 3rd of July, and the 26th of July. They went out for a certain mandate given to this administration, to this government, to bring about a better future, a civil, democratic state. I'm confirming to our fellow Egyptians that we are continuing our path of building and establishing our constitution. Nothing will deter us, nothing will stop us, nothing will make us even lose time over continuing the path of establishing our constitutional foundation. Our constitutional path is continuing. The Committee of Experts is finishing its work very soon. The Committee of the 50 is established in no time. We will fulfill our dues and fulfill our pledges to our people. We're keen and welcoming the participation of all Egyptian parties, factions, in the future of Egypt, as long as they haven't been involved in instigating violence, instigating acts of terror, or practicing violence, or practicing acts of terror. They're all welcomed, regardless of their background. For Egyptian people that went out against theological fascism on the 30th of June, 3rd of July, and the 26th of July, we give them our promise that we wouldn't allow the attacks of theological extremism or theological terrorism in their life in any time to come. We will combat extremism and we will combat terrorism, not only by security measures, but by the rule of law, by making sure that we have the proper framework of human rights established, and by making sure that we're continuing our proper path to democracy, as we promised and we will fulfill. Egypt is not a weak state. Egypt is not a satellite state. Egypt is a sovereign state that observes, analyzes, decides in due time, and fulfill and accomplishes what it decides. Egypt observes as a state, as an administration, and the Egyptian people as well, with great concern, the position of all parties, of all nations and parties and factions, giving justifications. As much as we extend our deepest sorrow and our condolence for each drop of blood that has been victimized by the acts of terror, we also noted the statements made by the international community in regret of that. That came out of the United States and I think of Taliban as well. Egypt observes, and the Egyptian people observes with great concern, who stands by the Egyptian people and the Egyptian state now, and who's standing against us now. We observe that, we see it, and we take note of that. Finally, this is a founding stage, a founding phase in our lives, not only a transitional phase. We will establish our nation, the aspired nation, on truth and justice, and nothing else. I thank you all.